In the meantime, while Eskom is struggling to keep the lights on this week, we also have the news that a generator that was part of the 5 billion rand Koeberg nuclear revamp project was dropped at a Chinese factory. This has sparked concern that the December deadline for delivery will be missed. We now speak to Peter Becker from the Koeberg Alliance Group. Peter, good afternoon. Thanks for speaking to us today. Some insight into that which has been dropped and risks Eskom not meeting that deadline.
Yes, well, firstly, I think this is a story from quite a long time ago. I think it's over a year ago that this actually happened. So it's not really anything to do with the current situation, apart from the fact, of course, that it's one of the many factors that have caused delays at the plant.
So is this dropping a year ago contributing to the delays that we're experiencing now? Or that Eskom is experiencing, rather?
Absolutely. It's one of the many things, you know. And I think one of the biggest reasons why we've had unnecessary load shedding recently is that Eskom decided to attempt a refurbishing of the plant by putting in the steam generators that it did have on site. And that to do that, they took the plant offline on January the 18th. But when the French arrived, and this has been well reported in the press, when the French arrived, they weren't ready for them. So the French went back home and they haven't done those steam generators. And they left behind an invoice for 1.1 billion rand as a penalty for wasting their time. So that was another reason where the delays have come from. But this dropping of the steam generator is not so much to do with the current situation.
Well, you raise an interesting point there, a billion rand worth of penalty because of inefficiencies. Is it these inefficiencies that are contributing to this entire Eskom debacle? And talk to us also about the consultants that were there waiting for Eskom and weren't able to do any work.
Consultants from Framatome who came over and were not able to start the work, or rather they refused to start the work because a building to house the old steam generators wasn't ready, and that was supposed to be ready for it. And, you know, if you look at the cost, that 1 billion rand you mentioned is quite a significant amount. And Eskom have estimated that the refurbishment that they're attempting to do on the plant will cost about 20 billion rand. But of course, we know that when Eskom makes an estimate on the cost on a large project, it's probably going to be significantly more. It's already gone up to 21.1 billion because of that penalty. So it's really a question of, is it worth spending money on an old plant? And how many more surprises, emergent defects, faulty control rods, wrong valves, faulty ventilation systems are going to be found? And what's the cost of that going to be? And if you look at the current license of Koeberg, it expires in July 2024. And at this rate, the refurbishment work is hardly going to be finished by then. And since they have not yet got approval for the life extension beyond July 2024, it's a bit of a question mark over how wise it is to be spending this money.
Now, what we do know is that approvals take at least 12 months. So we obviously, or Eskom, find themselves in a bit of a quandary. Now, what are your thoughts on that, and what is the way forward? What are their alternatives?
Well, if you look at the load shedding crisis that we're in, 2022 and 2023 are looking very bleak or very red as per the Eskom predictions. So it's in that time that we really need every single kilowatt hour that we can get out of every single generating station, because the cost of load shedding is phenomenal. I think the recent outage of Koeberg has added billions, I think 9 billion rand or so, to the cost to the economy due to unserved energy. So if we look at what we need to do, we need to build new capacity. And I think everyone has finally agreed with that. The Section 34 determination that has been issued recently, hopefully we get some action out of the DMRE on that. We need to build new capacity rapidly. The old coal power stations and the old nuclear stations are breaking down because they're old, and that's not going to change. So what we should be doing is keeping those plants running for now while we build new renewables. And we know that a new renewable plant can come online within 2 years. So between now and 2024 July, which is when the Koeberg license expires, we should be building massive new capacity and not trying to replace steam generators and take units offline for extended periods, which has a huge cost to the economy, in the hope that we can get this limping plant working in 2024, by which time we probably won't need it if we've built the new capacity that we should build.
Now, how much of this responsibility of building new capacity should be left to Eskom to do on their own, and how much of it should go to private sector, if at all?
Okay, so that's an interesting question. So the first thing to understand is that neither Eskom nor the private sector could build large-scale, utility-scale generating capacity without approval from the DMRE. So that's become a bit hazy recently when they've lifted the exemptions on the 100-megawatt limit and so on. But for a large-scale build, the first step that has to be done is the Minister of Energy has to issue a Section 34 determination. That has to go to NERSA, the National Energy Regulator, and that has to approve it there. So it's a bit harsh on Eskom to say, well, Eskom should be building, Eskom should be doing this. Eskom's hands are tied if they do not get the correct direction from national government. So what we need to be doing is allowing Eskom to do that, to lift the barriers in the way of Eskom, and also to allow private sector to go ahead. I think we're at a point where we can't really pick and choose. We can't say, let's close this door and open that door and let's allow our favorite ideas to go forward. We've really got to open all the doors and let anyone who's able to add capacity to the grid to go ahead. Obviously not bypassing regulations. We still need the EIAs and everything to be done, but they should be fast-tracked. And we need to have everybody add capacity to the grid as quickly as possible.
Final thoughts on this, Peter, the prospect of importing power as a stopgap measure. Is it something to look at for us? Does Eskom need to do more of that?
So is that like the gas power ships you're talking about, or via the grid from other African countries?
Via the grid from other African countries.
Absolutely. I think if there's spare energy there, we should definitely take that into account and to use it. At the moment, I believe we often export electricity because of contracts that we have in place and so on. But I don't think, if you look at the amount of electricity that South Africa uses, it dwarfs the consumption across the rest of Africa. So I don't think we're really going to find a significant solution to our problems outside our own borders. We need to look at building that here. And we do. We have the willingness to do it. We are blessed with some of the best sunlight figures in the world, second only to the Sahara. We have incredibly good wind regimes here where we can harness that energy. We need to add some storage to that, and we can be self-sufficient quite easily if we allow that to happen by removing the regulatory hurdles that have been put in place by the protectionism that's around the coal industry and also the nuclear industry.
That was Peter Becker from the Koeberg Alliance Group, painting a grim picture of how things stand with Eskom and the need to create more capacity for Eskom in the immediate future.